The buzzard circled low, a dark, patient augury against the brassy sky. Below them, a man lay sprawled in the dust of the Arizona territory, still as death itself. Ilara reined in her weary mare, Sage, her eyes narrowed against the sun's glare, drawn to the unnatural stillness and the glint of metal a gun belt, half buried. He was dying, she knew the signs, another soul swallowed by the unforgiving land. Or perhaps he was something far more dangerous. She dismounts, her hand instinctively going to the worn stock of the rifle in its scabbard. Every line of his still form, even near death, screamed of a life lived on the razor's edge. A bounty hunter, by the look of his gear, or an outlaw. One was as perilous as the other to a woman alone. Yet, a faint, ragged breath hitched in his chest, a fragile testament against the vast indifference of the desert. To help him was to invite the storm into her carefully constructed solitude. To leave him was to betray a deeply ingrained compassion she couldn't silence. He is a stranger, marked by violence, his face a grim tapestry of old scars and fresh pain. Her small cabin, nestled in a hidden canyon miles from any traveled trail, is her sanctuary, a fragile bubble of peace in a world that offered little of it. And with a whispered plea to whatever spirits watched over fools and lost causes, she makes her choice, a choice that will tether her fate to the most formidable man she had ever encountered. She begins the arduous task of dragging him, an almost impossible dead weight, towards her distant refuge, towards a future veiled in shadow and uncertainty. For when this man wakes, if he wakes, he will be more than just a life she saved. He will be a reckoning, a tempest, and perhaps her only chance at a life beyond the quiet echo of her own heartbeat. And with a final, desperate heave, she maneuvers him over the threshold of her cabin, the door thudding shut behind them, sealing them in as the first drops of a brewing storm pattered against the roof, a prelude to the tumult about to unfold in their lives. That was a close call. Before we see how Ilara navigates this, tell us in the comments, what's the toughest situation you've ever had to survive? And if you admire pure grit, hit that like button and subscribe. The stranger had been a leaden weight, his body an unyielding testament to the harshness of his life and the nearness of its end. Ilara had strained every muscle, her breath coming in ragged gasps, as she'd pulled him from the open cruelty of the desert sun into the comparative cool of her small two-room cabin. It wasn't much, built by her own hands and those of her late husband, Thomas, years ago, but it was sturdy, a haven against the wind, the heat, and the occasional unwelcome rider. Now it sheltered a different kind of danger. She'd managed to get him onto the narrow cot Thomas had once used, the ropes creaking in protest. His clothes were stiff with dried blood and trail dust. Gently, meticulously, she began the grim task of tending to him. A bullet had torn through his left side, high on the ribs, missing anything vital by a hair's breadth, or so she prayed. Another had grazed his temple, leaving a bloody furrow. There were other cuts, bruises, the map of a brutal fight. He was lean but powerfully built, muscles corded beneath skin tanned to the color of old leather. His face, even slack in unconsciousness, was hard, etched with lines that spoke of suspicion and a life spent watching his back. A dark stubble shadowed a firm jaw, and his hair, black as a raven's wing, was matted with sweat and grime. Ilara worked with a practiced efficiency born of necessity. Life in the territory had taught her many things, and doctoring wounds was one of them. She cleaned the injuries with boiled water and a harsh lye soap, her touch surprisingly gentle despite the roughness of her hands, calloused from chopping wood, tending her small garden, and handling reins. She stitched the deeper gash on his side with a needle and gut, her brow furrowed in concentration. His breathing was shallow, his skin hot to the touch. Fever was setting in, and that was as dangerous as any bullet. Days blurred into a rhythm of care. She forced sips of water, then thin broth between his cracked lips. She bathed his fevered brow with cool cloths, changed his dressings, and listened to the rasp of his breathing, her own heart a tight knot of anxiety. Her solitude, once a quiet companion, now felt heavy with his silent, formidable presence. Who was he? What trouble had brought him to her doorstep, half dead? His saddlebags, which she'd retrieved under the cover of dusk, offered few clues. Only a spare shirt, some ammunition, a well-oiled Colt peacemaker, and a worn leather pouch containing a meager collection of coins and a dog-eared wanted poster. Not for him, but for a man named Red Schofield, wanted for murder and stagecoach robbery. So, he was a bounty hunter. The thought sent a chill down her spine. Men who hunted other men for a price were often as hard and unforgiving as their prey. The landscape around her cabin was a stark, beautiful prison. Red rock canyons rose sharply, their walls streaked with millennia of wind and water. Scrub oak and juniper clung to life in the arid soil. It was a place where secrets could be kept, but also where help was a day's hard ride away, and danger could appear with the suddenness of a hawk dropping on its prey. She kept her rifle close, her ears attuned to any unfamiliar sound. Once, she saw riders in the distance, 3 of them, moving slowly along the ridge opposite her canyon. They were too far to make out details, but their presence was a cold reminder that the world beyond her hidden valley was not empty. She doused her cookfire early that day, ensuring no smoke would betray her. The bounty hunter muttered in his fever dreams, disjointed phrases, names she didn't recognize. McAllister, the pass, damn you, Jessup, fragments of a violent past. His hands would clench, his body would arch, as if fighting unseen demons. In those moments, Ilara would speak to him softly, her voice a low murmur, trying to soothe the storm within him. She wasn't sure if he heard, or if her words even registered, but it was all she could offer beyond the physical care. It was nearly a week after she'd brought him in that his fever finally broke. She dozed off in her rocking chair, exhausted, the rifle across her lap. A small sound, a sigh that was more than just the wind of unconsciousness, brought her instantly awake. His eyes were open, not wide, but slitted, watching her. They were a startling grey, like a winter sky, and in their depths, she saw a flicker of awareness, sharp and assessing. He tried to speak, but only a dry croak emerged. Ilara rose slowly, setting the rifle aside but keeping it within reach. She poured a dipper of water and brought it to him, supporting his head as he drank. He coughed, then managed a raspy, "Where?" "My cabin," she said, her voice calm, betraying none of the apprehension churning inside her. "You were half dead in the desert. I brought you here." His gaze swept the small room, taking in the rough-hewn table, the stone fireplace, the few meager possessions that constituted her world. It lingered on her face. "Who are you?" Ilara Hayes." He absorbed this, his eyes still wary. "The men who ambushed me." "I saw no one else," she replied. "Just you." He tried to sit up, a grimace of pain twisting his features. She put a firm hand on his shoulder. "Don't. You're not healed yet. You lost a lot of blood." He sank back, his breath hissing through his teeth. The fight seemed to go out of him, replaced by a profound weariness. "Obliged," he muttered, the words sounding foreign on his lips. Then his eyes closed, and he drifted back into a more natural sleep. The crisis passed, but a new tension filling the small cabin. He was awake, and she had no idea what that would mean. The following days established a new, cautious rhythm. His name, he told her in a voice still rough from disuse, was Caleb Thorne. He volunteered little else, and Ilara didn't press. She continued to tend his wounds, bring him food, thin stew, a bit of dried jerky softened in broth, and watch as strength slowly seeped back into his frame. He was a quiet patient, observant, his grey eyes missing nothing. He'd watch her as she moved about the cabin, her capable hands kneading dough for biscuits, mending a tear in her dress, or cleaning her rifle with an efficiency that spoke of long practice. The first time he sat up on his own, the cabin seemed to shrink. He was a large man, and his presence, even weakened, was commanding. He ate the rabbit stew she offered, slowly, deliberately, his gaze often drifting to the window, to the slice of unforgiving landscape visible beyond. "You live out here alone?" he asked one afternoon, his voice gaining its timbre. "Yes," Ilara said simply, stirring the pot over the small fire. "Not afraid?" She met his gaze. "Fear is a luxury I can't often afford, Mr. Thorne. Caution is more useful." A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed his face. "Caleb," he corrected her. She nodded. "Ilara." He began to chafe at his confinement. He'd test his strength, walking a few steps in the cabin, his hand often going to his bandaged side. She saw the impatience in him, the restlessness of a man accustomed to action. She also saw the pain he tried to hide. One morning she found him outside, leaning against the cabin wall, squinting at the harsh sunlight. He'd pulled on his own trousers, though his shirt hung open, revealing the bandages. "You shouldn't be up," she admonished, though her tone was mild. He gave a grunt. A man can't lay abed forever, starts to feel like half a man. He looked around the small, cleared area in front of the cabin, at her neatly stacked woodpile, the small herb garden. "You manage all this by yourself?" "Since my husband died, yes." The words were plain, stated fact. Thomas had been gone 5 years, taken by a fever not unlike the one Caleb had battled. His gaze softened, just for a moment. "Hard life for a woman alone." "Life is hard for most folk out here, Caleb, man or woman." She found his wanted poster for Red Schofield tucked back into his saddlebag one day when she was checking the leather for wear. He saw her holding it when he came back inside. His face hardened. "You know what I am, then?" "A bounty hunter," she said, her voice even. He nodded, his eyes searching hers for judgment, for fear. "Does that trouble you?" Ilara considered this. "It's a dangerous trade. Seems it almost got you killed." She folded the poster and put it back. "The men you hunt, they're dangerous too, like this Schofield." "They are," he agreed, his voice flat. "Some men only understand one kind of justice." She didn't reply, but a new layer of understanding and perhaps apprehension settled between them. He wasn't just a wounded man, he was a purveyor of a harsh frontier law, a man who dealt in pursuit and capture, life and death. A traveling peddler, old Jedediah Smith, passed through her hidden valley twice a year, his mules laden with goods. Ilara traded dried herbs and some skillfully tanned hides for flour, salt, and news of the outside world. Jedediah arrived a few weeks after Caleb had begun to walk around, his voice a welcome break in the silence. Ilara, after a moment's hesitation, didn't try to hide Caleb's presence, though she introduced him simply as a traveler who met with some trouble. Jedediah, a man whose eyes missed little, took in Caleb's healing wounds, the way he carried himself even in his weakened state, and drew his own conclusions. Over a shared meal of Ilara's rabbit stew, he spoke of happenings in the territory. "There's a posse out of Prescott," Jedediah said, wiping his beard. "Looking for some members of the McAllister gang. Seems they hit the Wells Fargo office down near Weaverville. Shot a clerk, they did. Nasty business." Caleb, who had been listening intently, stilled. Ilara saw his knuckles whiten where he gripped his tin cup. McAllister. It was one of the names he'd muttered in his fever. "They say," Jedediah continued, oblivious to the sudden tension, "the McAllisters are also looking for a bounty hunter who was on their trail. Word is he wounded a couple of them before they brought him down. Left him for dead, but seems they ain't too sure he stayed that way, offering a reward for information on him or for anyone who might have helped him." Ilara felt a cold dread creep up her spine. She carefully avoided looking at Caleb. Jedediah, satisfied with his meal and his news delivery, soon packed up his mules and departed, leaving a silence in the cabin that was far heavier than before. Once the sound of Jedediah's mules faded, Caleb finally spoke, his voice grim. "The McAllister gang, that was them. I was tracking Jessup McAllister, the leader." "And they're looking for you," Ilara said, her own voice barely a whisper. "And anyone who helped you." He met her gaze, his grey eyes filled with a bleakness that mirrored her own fear. "You're in danger because of me, Ilara." The unspoken truth hung between them. Her isolated cabin was no longer a sanctuary, but a target. He pushed himself to his feet, wincing as he straightened. "I need to leave. Draw them away from you." Ilara's heart clenched. The thought of him riding out, still not fully healed, into the path of a murderous gang was unbearable. But the alternative, them finding him here, with her. "They'll come here anyway, Caleb," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "Jedediah knew you were here. If they question him, he's an old man, he might talk. They'll backtrack. They'll find this place." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration and weariness. Damn it. He looked around the small cabin, his gaze lingering on her. "I've brought my war to your doorstep." "It seems war has found us both," she replied quietly. A strange sense of resolve began to fill her. She had faced hardship before, had buried a husband, had carved a life out of this unforgiving land. She wouldn't simply be a victim. My best chance is with you. If they come, we face them together. He stared at her, surprise and another, unreadable emotion in his eyes. You'd do that, after I brought this down on you? You didn't ask to be ambushed near my home, Caleb, and I chose to help you. She took a deep breath. Besides, I'm a fair shot, and this is my home. I'll defend it. A slow smile, the first genuine smile she'd ever seen from him, touched his lips. It transformed his hard face, making him look younger, almost boyish. All right, Ilara Hayes, together then. The next few days were charged with a new urgency. Caleb, despite his healing wound, moved with a focused intensity. He checked his Colt, cleaned and oiled it meticulously. He showed Ilara how to reload it quickly, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he guided hers. He insisted she practice with her rifle, setting up tin cans on a distant rock outcropping. Her aim was steady, a skill honed from years of hunting for the pot, but he gave her small pointers, showing her how to lead a moving target, how to control her breathing. The McAllisters are ruthless, he told her one evening, as they sat by the fire, the shadows dancing on the cabin walls. They won't just ride on, they'll be cautious, they'll scout. We need to be ready. They planned their defense. The cabin offered good cover from two sides, with the canyon wall at its back. The main approach was from the narrow valley opening. They gathered extra water, secured her few chickens in a small hidden coop further up the canyon, and barricaded the windows with heavy shutters Thomas had built years ago for winter storms. In these preparations, a new intimacy bloomed between them, forged in shared purpose and impending danger. They worked side by side, their movements often synchronized, their conversations sparse but meaningful. She saw the keen intelligence in his eyes as he assessed their surroundings, the way he anticipated problems. He, in turn, saw her quiet courage, her resilience, her unwavering determination. One evening, as the sun bled orange and purple across the western sky, he sat beside her on the small bench outside the cabin. The air was cool, carrying the scent of dust and sage. "Ilara," he began, his voice low, when we get through this, I'm not riding out of your life." She turned to look at him, her heart giving a sudden lurch. His grey eyes were serious, intense. "I've spent my life chasing men, chasing bounties, always moving, never settling. I never thought." He paused, searching for words. "When I woke up here, I was just grateful to be alive. But watching you, seeing your strength, your kindness, you saved more than just my life." He reached out, his calloused fingers tentatively touching her arm. "I know I'm not much, a rough man with a rough past, but what I feel for you, it's real. Once this is over, Ilara, you're going to be my only target." He saw the flicker of alarm in her eyes and rushed to clarify, a faint flush rising on his weathered cheeks. Not like a bounty. I mean, you'll be my focus, my destination, if you'll have me." Ilara's breath caught. His clumsy, heartfelt declaration resonated deep within her, stirring emotions she thought long dead. The loneliness that had been her constant companion for 5 years felt, for the first time, like a tangible weight lifting. "Caleb," she whispered, her own voice thick with emotion. Before she could say more, a faint sound drifted down the canyon, the distant nicker of a horse. They both froze, their eyes meeting in grim understanding. "They're here," Caleb said, his voice hard, all trace of softness gone. He rose, pulling his Colt from its holster. "Get inside, bar the door." The night was a tapestry of fear and adrenaline. They doused the lamp, plunging the cabin into near darkness, lit only by the faint moonlight seeping through cracks in the shutters. Ilara took her position at one window, rifle ready, Caleb at another. The silence stretched, taut and suffocating, broken only by the frantic thumping of her own heart and the chirping of crickets, oblivious to the human drama about to unfold. Then, a soft footfall outside, a twig snapping. "Thorn," a gravelly voice called out from the darkness. "We know you're in there, and we know about the woman. Send her out, and maybe we'll let you die quick." Caleb didn't answer. His breathing was steady beside her, a reassuring presence in the terrifying darkness. "Don't be a fool, Thorn," the voice came again, closer this time. "There's 5 of us. You can't win. Elara could make out shadowy figures now, moving in the moonlight, fanning out to surround the cabin. Her hands were slick with sweat on the rifle stock. "Jessup McAllister," Caleb said, his voice low but carrying. "Still hiding behind your men, I see." A harsh laugh answered him. "I'm not hiding, Thorn. I'm just making sure you don't get lucky again. The woman, Thorn. Send her out." "She stays with me," Caleb called back, his voice ringing with a possessiveness that sent a strange thrill through Elara, despite the fear. "Then you both die." The first shot splintered the wood of the shutter near Elara's head. She flinched but held her position. Caleb returned fire, a muzzle flash briefly illuminating his grimly set face. The fight was joined. Gunfire erupted from all sides, the roar deafening in the enclosed space of the valley. Bullets thudded into the cabin walls, sending splinters flying. Elara aimed carefully, firing at the muzzle flashes she saw in the darkness. She heard a yelp of pain from outside, and a small surge of triumph shot through her. Caleb moved with a deadly efficiency, firing, ducking, reloading. He was a whirlwind of controlled violence, protecting her, protecting their small fortress. She saw one of McAllister's men try to rush the door. Caleb's Colt barked twice, and the man crumpled. Time lost all meaning. It was a chaotic ballet of muzzle flashes, shouts, the smell of gunpowder sharp in her nostrils. She reloaded her rifle, her fingers clumsy but sure, Caleb's instructions echoing in her mind. She saw another figure dart between the rocks near the woodpile. She took a breath, aimed, and fired. The figure dropped. Suddenly, a fiery object arced through the air and landed on the cabin's sod roof, a burning torch. "Damn them," Caleb swore. The roof, dry from the summer heat, would catch quickly. "We have to get out," Elara cried, coughing as smoke began to seep into the cabin. "The back way." Caleb grabbed her arm. "The small window in the storeroom. It leads to the rock face. We can climb up a ways." They scrambled to the tiny storeroom at the back of the cabin. Flames were already licking at the edges of the roof, casting an eerie, dancing light. Caleb kicked open the small, shuttered window. It was a tight squeeze. "You first," he urged. Elara hesitated, looking back at their home, now wreathed in smoke and flame. "Go, Elara, now." She squeezed through the opening, scraping her arms, and found herself on a narrow ledge against the cool rock of the canyon wall. Caleb followed, agile despite his size and his healing wound. Below them, McAllister's men, realizing they'd flushed their prey, were yelling, their figures illuminated by the growing blaze. "They're trying to get around back," one shouted. Caleb pushed Elara upwards. "Climb, don't look down." The rock face was steep, but there were handholds and footholds. She climbed, her muscles screaming, her lungs burning from smoke and exertion. Caleb was right behind her, guiding her, his presence a shield. A shot whizzed past her ear. One of McAllister's men was at the base of the cliff, aiming up. Caleb twisted, firing his Colt downwards. The man screamed and fell back. They reached a wider ledge, about 20 feet up. The cabin below was now fully ablaze, a funeral pyre for her old life. Only 2 of McAllister's men were left, including McAllister himself, standing in the flickering firelight, their faces contorted with rage. "You won't get away, Thorn," McAllister bellowed, raising his rifle. But Caleb was ready. He'd braced himself against the rock, taking careful aim. He fired. McAllister staggered, dropping his rifle, clutching his shoulder. His remaining man, seeing his leader hit, hesitated for a fatal second. Caleb's next shot caught him in the chest. He fell without a sound. McAllister, wounded and alone, stared up at them, his face a mask of hatred in the firelight. Then, with a curse, he turned and stumbled away into the darkness, disappearing down the canyon. Silence descended, broken only by the crackling of the burning cabin and their own ragged breathing. Caleb slowly lowered his gun, his shoulders slumping. He leaned heavily against the rock, his face pale in the moonlight. Elara rushed to his side. "Caleb, are you hit?" He shook his head, then winced, touching his side. "Old wound, just," complaining. He looked at her, his grey eyes searching hers in the dim light. "You were magnificent, Elara." She managed a shaky smile. "You weren't so bad yourself, bounty hunter." He reached out, his hand finding hers, his grip surprisingly strong. "It's over." She looked down at the burning ruins of her home, the only home she'd known for years. A wave of desolation washed over her, followed by a strange, fierce sense of liberation. That life was gone. A new one, uncertain and fraught with peril, but shared, lay before them. He pulled her closer, his arm going around her waist. She leaned against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. They stood there for a long moment, two survivors on a narrow ledge, the smoke of their past below them, the vast, starry expanse of the desert sky above. The fire eventually died down, leaving smoldering embers and the acrid smell of burnt wood. As the first pale light of dawn touched the canyon walls, Caleb stirred. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice hoarse. "McAllister might come back with friends, though I doubt he's got many left after tonight." Ilara nodded. There was nothing left for them in this small, hidden valley but ashes and memories. They climbed down carefully in the growing light. The devastation was complete. Her small garden was trampled, the woodpiles scattered. The cabin was a blackened shell. Caleb salvaged what he could from his saddlebags, which Sage, her mare, had miraculously kept from the worst of the flames, having been tethered a little distance away. Ilara found a few scorched cooking pots, a singed blanket, not much to start a new life with. But as she looked at Caleb, his face smudged with soot, his clothes torn, but his grey eyes fixed on her with a fierce tenderness, she knew they had the most important thing, each other. He took her hand. "I told you, Ilara, you're my target now, my only one." His voice was rough, but his meaning was clear. He wasn't hunting her, he was choosing her, vowing to her. His relentless focus, once reserved for bringing men to justice, was now turned towards building a life with her. "We'll find a new place, a better place, together." She laced her fingers through his, her calloused palm fitting against his. The weariness was immense, but beneath it, a resilient hope began to flicker. "Together," she echoed. He helped her onto Sage, then swung up behind her. With one last look at the ruins, they turned the mare's head and rode out of the canyon, not towards any known destination, but towards a future they would face side by side. The sun was rising, painting the desert in hues of rose and gold, and as Caleb's arm tightened around her waist, Ilara knew that whatever came next, she was no longer alone. His hunt for bounties was over, his pursuit of a life, a love, with her, had just begun. Thanks for watching. If you believe in compassion overcoming prejudice and finding love in unexpected places, give this story a like and subscribe for more. This story showed love and heroism where least expected. What was your favorite moment of connection between them? Tell us in the comments.